All right, everyone, welcome to our second week of lecture slides. I hope you enjoyed them. This is for Unit 2, Modules 4 through 5, and we're going to talk about other research methods. All right. So first, the need for psychological science is that we need to be able to draw conclusions about human behavior and the mental processes based on science, right? Rather than just common sense or intuition. So, a lot of psych, there's some gray areas, right? And so that's why psych is very debatable in some aspects, right? Because it's hard to collect data for a lot of our ideas and our theories. And so we just need to remember that we have to base this on science and not just what we think is common sense or intuition. And what about intuition and common sense? So a lot of people, believe that, it's kind of like, if you've ever had a gut feeling, right? Even though even though our gut feelings might help us avoid dangerous situations or, avoid certain people, they're not free of error, right? So we all have errors. Sometimes we prejudge people before we actually get to know them. We're like, oh, wow, like our instincts of, about these people were completely off, right? So thinking about, how can we try to be as, error-free as possible. All right, so when there's limits to our intuition, just like I said, a lot of, if you've ever been in an interview or you've ever been an interviewee, gut feelings go a long way with those first impressions, even though they may not be based in science, right? So that gut feeling when applying for job applications. Okay, so now we're going to start thinking critically, and we're going to dive into different types of research methods. But in order to, think critically, we can't accept conclusions blindly. We have to, evaluate and assess and, take away our assumptions and kind of take away the human, like our own biases of what our brain creates of, I think that this study is going to go this way, so I'm going to ignore, other signs that maybe that's not the conclusion, right? So just remember, like, as we think critically, we don't want to accept things blindly, right? Okay, so now in your notes, you can make a little title saying Descriptive Methods, and we are going to go over case studies, surveys, and naturalistic observations, okay? And they all have different parameters, and these are 3 other ways of experimenting and not just being experimentations. These are not experiments, these are other options of finding data, okay? So this is not an experiment. All right, let me erase, because I forgot that it'll be going to the next slide. Okay, so first off, case study. So in your notes, make sure you write case study number 1, and there's a reason that Freud's here. Freud finds his way everywhere. So a case study, really important. It's a technique in which one person, so make sure you highlight that it's one person, and they are studied in depth, okay? So when we think of a case study, we are kind of trying to figure out the underlying behaviors of people. So Freud is famous for case studies because he actually did case studies on his own children, which when we get into Freud, we'll see how that was bias in itself. But a case study is a technique that is used for one person, and you study them in depth, usually over years of time. And one of the pros about this is that you get very familiar with the the itty bitty information you get from behavior, but this does take a lot of time, right? So a case study takes years, right? And so thinking about, how people are affected by the coronavirus, there's probably lots of case studies getting started by, in different age groups of how it has affected them over time, right? So a case study is good if you want to study one person in depth, okay? So let me erase that. Okay, I wish that I wouldn't have to erase all the time. Okay, so case study number 1. Second, we have a survey, and surveys are a technique that we get our information from self-reporting, which means that people fill out their own answers, right? And there's already a bias in that, right? And they talk about the opinions or behaviors of people, and this is usually done by a questionnaire. with a random sample of people. So, for example, a survey, if you've ever gotten a survey, like people come to your house and they're like, have time to fill out this survey, right? And this could lead to a lot of biases, right? So first off, are people actually telling the truth, right? So surveys are not the best option for reliability of getting your information, like the correct information that you need or quality information. But, surveys are a quick way to quickly randomly sample a population, right? But a question for you with that is, if I say, let's survey everyone in Windsor, there's a bias behind that because is everyone going to answer the door for the surveys? Right? Maybe only a set group of people who are stuck at home per se, right? So surveys lead to a lot of bias, right? And so surveys, they are used in studies, but they're not the most reliable. So you can't create a whole theory off of a survey per se, because scientists are going to want to know more information, right? Okay. So within surveys, so we're still in the survey, something to think about, it's called wording effects. And this is a vocab word. So wording effects. The way people who create the surveys can word the questions can lead to bias, right? So wording effects are very important in advertisements and political campaigns. So for example, if say that, I open the door and someone asks me, okay, can I ask you a few questions for a survey? And they say, Miss H, do you use your blinker to blinker correctly to go left or right? And I would say, yes or no, not really, whatever. But what if they said it this way? Miss H, do you use your blinker to save lives? Well, I obviously am not going to say no to that, right? So there's a way that you can word it to make people answer the way you want them to, right? And that's wording effects. So when you think of surveys, this is one of the biases or a con when it comes to surveys. And then, of course, you need to have a random sample. So this is still under the surveys. You need to have a random sample. And this means if each member of a population has an equal chance of being included in this study, right? So there's no biases. You're not only, picking certain people from certain neighborhoods, right? You need to have a random sample in order for it to be valid, right? If the survey sample is biased, then psychologists are not going to read your results, right? So if you're only targeting certain populations and there's no randomized to it, then it's already biased and people will not listen to your survey, right? All right. And last but not least for this quick module 4.5, we have naturalistic observations. This is the third type of way with your descriptive methods. And naturalistic observation is very similar to how it sounds. It's when you observe and record the behavior of animals or humans in the wild, right? And the thing that's hard about this concept is that it's really hard to actually get a naturalistic observation without bias, right? So naturalistic observations, all you are doing is watching and taking notes. You're not making any conclusions. You're just writing down what you see. So this is a very behavioral based aspect of learning, right? And so, for example, what if, say, the principal wants to come visit my class, right? And they come in and they're like a fly on the wall. Is that a naturalistic observation? No, right? Because them in my environment already affects the way that I am working, right? So naturalistic observations, you can't be seen, right? Or else you are already affecting it, right? So, kind of like the zoo is kind of a big naturalistic observation, but they can still see you, right? So is it not? So naturalistic observations are kind of hard to create, and they're only for you to be writing down the observable behaviors, no conclusions, okay? All right, and that will conclude the first video.